Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the first annual Integral Lifetime Achievement Award tribute honoring our friend, our mentor, and all-around smartest guy in the room, Ken Wilber.
Simple in me. Woke up already free. 1,000 stories removed, living proof of nothing to prove.
Please welcome your host for this evening, the fabulous Stuart Davis.
Good evening, ladies, gentlemen, Superman. Yes, we are here to celebrate you, Ken. Tonight we take a journey through your story so far. We're going to take a peek at the prismatic gem of your mind, your heart, and the big love you amplify in others. There will be biographical clips, live guests, video and audio tributes, and of course, at the end, I will pin you down and let every person in this room tickle you. We'll also take a look to the future because, newsflash, Ken is writing again. Yes. In fact, by the time I finish this sentence, Ken will have composed another book. So, Without further delay, it's always good to start at the beginning.
Contrary to many urban legends, Ken Wilber did not arrive in this world a fully formed, bald, smartest guy in the room. He was born of parents just like any other human being, and early on he was made to endure the classic 50s family photo op. Ken's father was a military pilot and a decorated officer, and his mother was a classic 50s beauty, a master of all trades domestic. However, there is some spotty evidence that from a very early age, Ken was thinking big thoughts on the beach. He even experienced an early brush with fame when a photographer for the Saturday Evening Post thought he was the perfect face for a Johnson baby powder promotion. As Ken entered elementary school, he participated in all the first grade rituals. This one, the infamous bunny dance. That's Ken there in the back, already one of the tallest on the block. Ken developed an early interest in spirituality and received a diploma celebrating his attendance record at Sunday school. Shades of what was yet to come. Being a military brat, Ken's family moved around a lot, but the upside was Bermuda. Even his parents thought about reenacting a famous beach scene from the classic potboiler, From Here to Eternity. One other thing to be noticed about the early Ken is that there always seems to be a mysterious girl in a lot of the childhood photos. This is a theme that will repeat itself as Ken continues on his way. Being an only child, Ken picked his friends very carefully, showed superb athletic prowess, and looked forward to a career as a doctor and a medical researcher. We're not exactly sure what he did to the rat. The years passed pleasantly enough as Ken evolved through high school. The academic awards piled up, trophies were presented, notice the mysterious girl again, races were won, and public notice of Ken's overall excellence was not lost on anybody. And then it happened. Ken got a car, dressed up for the prom, and began considering his freedom as the 60s blended into the 70s and Ken came of age. Little did we know that in the very near future, Ken would become this guy. But whoever first arrived as this beautiful soul, he had just begun to make his mark on an unsuspecting world.
Ken, as a young man, you go to Duke to become a doctor, but then you drop out because you start reading Eastern philosophy, the gateway drug of non-duality. While you were having fun dissecting cow eyeballs, there was someone in a basement in Berkeley who had discovered your secret philosophical life.
Please welcome Ken's publisher and longtime friend, Sam Burkholz.
Hey, Ken, and all of the rest of you here. My first memory of Ken actually was checks and long orders for various esoteric books when I ran a bookstore in Berkeley, California, Shambhala Booksellers. And this guy from Lincoln, Nebraska kept ordering all these weird books on Zen and Buddhism and Hinduism and all kinds of things. And, you know, who knew there was consciousness in Lincoln, Nebraska of that kind? Well, that is my first memory of you. My second memory is a very wonderful one, which is you had a little apartment owned by a little ashram in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and you were publishing Revision magazine. And I remember walking into the little basement apartment, and you had a big bag of Doritos there and stack of books, and just wow. Instant recognition of what? Who knows? Who cares? But that was the true beginning of a friendship and collaboration of many, many years presenting your work to the world. After that, Shambhala Publications became your publisher, and we started publishing away, me reading your material, arguing with you about some of it, you arguing back, but it all coming out really wonderfully. And our friendship developed there in Cambridge. I came back and visited more than once, and we spent, numberless hours discussing, aspects of spirituality, philosophy, and especially Buddhism over the years. there in Boulder, San Francisco. It's been a wonderful time, which culminated in the publication of your collected works to date, which is one of the most impressive bodies of work that I think any philosopher has produced. Ken, you've really made a difference in this world, and that's not a small thing. That's huge. And for making a difference, for actually changing people's minds, maybe this world is changing in a positive, evolutionary way. So, Mr. Wilber, I salute you, and I appreciate you as philosopher and friend.
Yes. Doritos, a nutritional regimen you've held up through your entire life, Ken, although you would later add Red Bull. There in Nebraska, in between washing all those dishes at the Red Rooster restaurant, you wrote Spectrum of Consciousness.
So I was 23 at the time and decided that this is what I wanted to do. So I went to my professors and said, I'm leaving. I'm going to write, quote, a book on consciousness, the soul, and stuff. And the look of horror in their faces was just absolutely, stupendous. They were absolutely, flabbergasted that this fairly bright, scientist had gone off the deep end and was into all sorts of, nonsense. But I left there, spent 3 months writing the first book called The Spectrum of Consciousness, and about 9 months typing it. I was so... 36 publishers turned it down. It subsequently picked up by Quest Books and is in print to this day. Has been translated into some 20 plus foreign languages. Still in print, and almost instantaneously made me known in the community, and in particularly the community at the time that was called transpersonal psychology.
Someone else found you at that time, another lifelong friend and colleague.
Please welcome Ken's former collaborator in the Revision Journal, Jack Crittenden.
Ken, congratulations on this milestone. I don't even know what the hell the milestone is, but congratulations on it, because anything that is a significant marker for something in your life, well, hell, it should be noted. So how are you? You lazy, super tall, dozy, silly, wonderful man. I love you. I've loved you for 40 years. But let me tell you about what you may not remember, the first time I encountered Ken Wilber. I was in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I was teaching, you won't remember this, Ken, but I was teaching high school English literature and composition. And for that reason, I was worried about brain death at an early age. And I came across something called Main Currents in Modern Thought, an obscure journal. Hardly anybody read it. And the first issue I got had an article in there called The Spectrum of Consciousness by Ken Wilber. And I remember reading that thinking, God, this makes sense. This really makes sense. And what you had done is integrated Western psychology and Eastern philosophy or psychology in a way that simply spoke directly to me, and it was so crystal clear. And for reasons that I don't fully understand, I wrote you a letter. And for reasons I know you don't fully understand, you wrote back. And we started a correspondence, and then, as I remember, phone calls that have extended for 40 years. I want you all to know that if you knew Ken 40 years ago, it's the same warmth and humor and cutting intellect and wonderful open embrace. He's been the same for 40 years. So this is a great occasion to say thank you. You have been for 40 years an inspiration and revelation for me. Anybody who looks at my work will see you everywhere in it. And I just thank you totally for that. God bless you. I love you, man.
There was another person who was there from the beginning, someone who became a best friend and an indispensable ally.
Please welcome Ken's longtime friend, Roger Walsh.
Ken, can you believe it? It's been 35 years since we met. 35 years ago in your little apartment in Lincoln, Nebraska, wherever that is. Started talking and haven't stopped since. And I remember arriving there and launching into this conversation and just being so delighted to find someone who was playing the same game, integrating psychology and spirituality and making sense of them, and it was just such a delight, and it still is. That conversation was actually initiated by a date I had earlier that year in 1977 with my girlfriend at the time, Frances. On one of our earliest dates, she arrived with this curious book called A Spectrum of Consciousness. And instead of going out and having fun, we spent the entire evening sitting around reading this book to each other. It totally ruined what it could have been a really hot date. But it worked out pretty well because it was such a fantastic book. The book I'd hoped to write in my 70s, and then it turned out you were only 23, so that was a little confusing. But Frances and I survived that evening and eventually got married. In fact, I was a little retarded in getting married because I should have appreciated and grabbed Frances as soon as possible before she came to her senses, but you tried to help by pointing out that I was about to turn 40, and in San Francisco, anyone who wasn't married by 40 was automatically assumed gay. So thank you for your help, I think. Thank you also for being my best man. So for 35 years, I've kept making pilgrimages to visit you in all parts of the country, and I've seen a lot of the country I wouldn't have otherwise seen, and you've helped and inspired and benefited my life in innumerable ways. I remember having a conversation with you once saying I couldn't get into philosophy, and you said, I love philosophy. And it was just that one sentence was enough to push me over the threshold and help me dive into and develop my own love of philosophy. So it's been an extraordinary gift to share your life and journey, been through extraordinary heights, amazing contribution and creativity, appropriate recognition and fame, and there have been real lows too. You've gone through the death of Treya and a debilitating illness, and it's been the full spectrum of what we call life, although played out in your case in some ways larger than life. I'm extremely grateful to have had the opportunity of sharing your journey and having you as my best friend for 35 years. I love you. I send you all best wishes.
Roger Walsh's better half has also been a lifelong friend and would soon introduce Ken to Treya.
Please welcome Frances Vaughn.
Hi, Ken. Well, congratulations on this wonderful occasion. I remember learning about your work for the first time way back in the 1970s when you submitted an article to the Journal of Transpersonal Psychology entitled The Spectrum of Consciousness. And I was on the staff there, on the editorial staff, and it was so exciting to publish your article. That was years before the book came out. And then I remember meeting you a few years later for the first time when you were living in Cambridge. And then when you decided that you'd like to come to California and Roger suggested that you could stay with us, we really will never forget that year that we spent together. And it was just such a wonderful time. I remember appreciating your sense of humor and your just having your presence with us. And it really was a great privilege to live together for a year, the three of us. And so I'm just wanting to express how grateful I am for the opportunity of knowing you well and also for all the coaching and editing that you offered me when I was working on my own books. You were a wonderful teacher. I learned so much from you. And even though we've had little contact in recent years, I'll always treasure our friendship. and all your many contributions to my life and my life's work. So thank you for this opportunity to express my gratitude and to say a truly heartfelt thank you for the many gifts and talents that you've shared so generously over the years. Much love to you, Ken.
Around this time, something known as Wilber II began to emerge. The evolutionary impulse was discovered, and your books reflected it. The major insight redefined your direction. Simply put, it's not about getting back to the Garden of Eden or recovering something we lost in the fall. Wilber II began to articulate the evolutionary impulse of cosmic creativity.
These two books, Outman Project and Up from Eden, were a really major change in my thinking. Much of the ideas of the what's called Wilber I, the early phase, spectrum of consciousness and no boundary, were still valid. There were still these levels of consciousness, but different psychotherapies and spiritual practices approached different ones. But it wasn't that we started out one with the superconscious and then became smaller and smaller. It's that we started out at the smallest acorn and grew and developed from there.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome, live in the room, Jeff Salzman.
Well, Up from Eden did it for me, and I was ready for it, and I think I probably speak for a lot of people in this room. And like you, Ken, I was a Sunday school kid, and in my teenage years, I started reading Ayn Rand, moved nicely into Orange, lost by religion, moved to Boulder in my 20s, and entered Green, kissed a lot of frogs in Boulder, with the Buddhist community and the psychological communities, and I did it all, and traveled and gurus. And I'd see my friends get their teachers and devote themselves and take vows, and I could never do it. I just could never take a vow. And I never thought I'd find my teacher. And then one day I was walking in the Boulder bookstore and I saw a book on the table, and I remember the moment. And it said Up from Eden. And I was just bodily thrilled and changed in that moment. I mean, in some ways that was half of my integral realization since. It happened right then and there. And good Lord, I bought the book and I went home and I knew by page 17 that I had found my teacher. And I still feel that way, And I can't believe being a Ken Wilber nut by myself isolated. I know the feeling that people have who come to these things and don't have places to be with people who understand them. I was there in Boulder, 5 miles from you, and I had no idea for years, reading every book as it came out. And then I learned that you lived there because my friend said, "Oh, Ken Wilber," because I was talking about you to somebody, and she said, "My husband does his teeth." And I said, "He does?" The philosopher guy, bald, yes. He lives up in Red Hill. He does? He lives in Boulder? Good God. I debate saying this, but I actually, well, fuck it. I made her go take me to the chair where he had done your teeth. That is the God's truth. That is the God's truth. And then the Tammy Simon told you about me, and you emailed me, and I got an email one morning, and opened my email, and there's an email from Ken Wilber, and I think in that half a second of practical joke, how could anybody, just, And I opened it, and you said, I hear you're interested in a girl. Would you like to have lunch? And my life changed once again, you know. And that I got to work with you all those years side by side is so precious to me. And the teacher aspect is just so strong, the one log lighting another. I just always felt so lit up in your presence, and that we would have meetings after you were up 3 in the morning writing, and we'd arrive at 9, you know, a crew of us, and have meetings where we would laugh more than I had laughed at a comedy club. And we just got so much done, and it was so beautiful, beautiful years. And that we work together now and we do this. I just can't believe my luck. I just am so grateful. And I think I speak for so many people where the evolutionary view changes everything. You know, it just helps you to just realize that you're being lived as well as living. It's just what a relief, you know. Ugh. So thank you, Ken. God bless you so much. God bless us all. And it's just nice to stand here and say that to you. Yeah, just love you so much.
Ken, you have a wonderful history of inspiring people that go on to do great things. For example,
Please welcome the CEO of Whole Foods, John Mackey.
Well, Ken Wilber, you've had an amazing impact on my own life, and maybe that's rippled out from me and had an impact on lots of people. I have a friend that talks about Kip Tyndall. He's the co-founder and CEO of the Container Store, and he calls it the power of one's wake. We are seldom conscious about how powerful any one person's wake can be, because we're not always clear or sure the impacts that we have and how these ripple out into the world. And I think, Ken, you've got a huge wake. You've had a huge impact, and the impacts that you have on somebody like me, then that ripples out and has impact on hundreds, perhaps thousands of other people. It'd be interesting if you could go back and do, what if scenario, like, well, what if I had never read Ken Wilber? Who would I be today? What would I believe? What would I be like? I'd like to think I somehow would have gotten to those ideas in some other way, because my soul or my heart or my inner spirit would have led me in some other direction, and I would have encountered these ideas in some other form. But in fact, it led me to you, and your ideas have transformed my life, and I will therefore say it's transformed Whole Foods Market, and I will therefore say it's had a huge impact on the way I think about business, the way I think about our culture, and the way I lead and the way I interact in the world. So I have like a life debt, and if there's such a thing as karma, I've got a big karmic debt to you, and I'm trying to pay some of it off to you this lifetime, but I think you've probably earned about 10 lifetimes at least of service from me for the great intellectual debt that I owe you. And of course, in person, you're a wonderful, kind, and obviously super bright guy who stimulates my mind, stimulates my heart, and it's been a pleasure to know you, and I just want to thank you. Thank you so much, Ken. You truly are a great man.
you've also inspired many spiritual teachers, deepening their relationship with their own tradition and connecting them with kindred spirits in other lineages.
Please welcome Father Thomas Keating.
Ken, I was thinking about what your greatest accomplishment was. You have really, seriously, so many gifts and accomplishments that it's hard to know where to start or to thank you. First of all, I want to thank you for all your writing has meant to me. I have been broadened, enriched, opened up, nourished body, soul, and spirit, and I still am. So you, it seems to me, are the philosopher of consciousness, at least for our time, or to move it along to new insights. By consciousness, I mean that new field of philosophy based on human nature itself, rather than a religious persuasion or cultural, and hence better adapted to the evolutionary development among humans that is continuing and may accelerate with all the technological advances. But I am convinced that your leadership in the study and practice of higher states of consciousness is the most important thing that anyone can be doing in our time. So as you face the new year, may you have new health. You've had your own bout with detachment and with illness, and hope that it's coming to an end, and that you will have the fullness of non-duality, as well as the full enjoyment of all your friends who haven't quite got there yet. Much love.
Please welcome Andrew Cohen.
Hi, Ken. First of all, I want to tell you that I love you. And I want to say that you're my brother, you're my soul brother, which I've told you so many times. And the reason for that is, you know, you have really always been there as a beacon of light and a beacon of support for all the work that I've done over all these years. I think, first of all, it's really almost impossible to overestimate the enormous influence your work and your ideas has had upon my own insights and the evolution of my own thinking as a teacher. In all the dialogues we've had together and continue to have together, to be honest, I often feel like we're making love on some kind of moral, philosophical, and metaphysical level. And I know, because of your very big heart and your very big mind, I'm able to come to a kind of clarity that I know on my own would never be possible. I think it's very important to say also that you know, that I've taken some very big risks as a teacher to push some boundaries so that some real breakthroughs would occur. And during those times, you were one of the few or one of the only people who was able to really see what I was trying to do, and you were able to understand where I was trying to go. And your support, your unwavering support for me at those times really gave me confidence, especially at moments really when I started to doubt whether what I was seeing was actually true. And I don't really know how to thank you for that. I mean, it was really, really so important to me. Also, just as a human example, you know, I often think, why is it that such a great man who's given all of us so much has, you know, been given such a test in life? You've had to endure enormous suffering and enormous human challenges, and you continue to do, and you have faced it with a kind of equanimity and a spiritual self-confidence that really is incredibly inspiring. So I love you deeply for all that you are and everything you've given us. And I thank you from the bottom of my heart. Thank you.
Likewise, you have sparked a whole new order of creativity in artists from every medium. Take these two cosmic characters, for instance.
Please welcome Alex and Allison Gray.
So I was aware of the influence and profound, respect that Alex had for Ken already. And Ken wanted to come over to our apartment because he lived in Cambridge and we lived in Boston. We had a loft downtown where we were both making art. And so he came over and he was voracious. He wanted to see everything that Alex had ever done. We opened every drawer, every closet, every shelf, and we showed him everything and told every story. And then he wasn't half finished because he wanted to see everything that I had done. And that, of course, touched me very much. And he saw every painting, every drawing, every watercolor, every framed piece. And we talked about our art, and we were just so, I mean, to get that kind of feedback, we were in deep, deep respect for Ken. And then what really surprised us both was that sometime in the middle of the following week, like Wednesday or something, he called us again and asked to come over again. And we thought, we don't have anything more to show him. What are we going to do? He's seen everything. There's nothing for us to show. So we invited a very dear friend of ours who's brilliant, Don Berge, and he's a genius conceptual artist, and we wanted to have just him as a guest, and Ken came over, and we asked Ken a million questions, and we spent the whole day and night just, like just drawing him out.
Having conversations with Ken Wilber over the decades has been profoundly enlightening. I think of it as one conversation, that comes from this root of wanting to understand the nature of creativity and consciousness, and how they're intertwined in spirituality. And so the kind of gratitude that I feel for this kind of core teaching that has resonated with all of my own self-discoveries and things. I've always felt such tremendous gratitude that I live at a time when such a great beacon of light is shining and calling us all toward our own higher and deeper nature. So I thank you, Ken, for being such a guide in my life, and much love always.
At least once in their lifetime, every spiritual figure has to move to California. That's the law. Ken was no exception. He set up shop with Roger and Francis and got a job documenting A Course in Miracles. Thank goodness, because then he meets Treya.
I had been dating on and off throughout that year. Amy and I have been divorced. Of that entire year, Roger and Francis agreed on not a single date I had. Roger used to find women that were, let's say, good for my body, and Francis found women that were good for my soul. And neither one of them could agree. Towards the end of that year, Francis came in, Roger came in, and said, I've got I've got the perfect woman for you. Can't believe I didn't think of this before. Her name is Terry Killam. And sort of quietly I thought, right, I'll take a skip on that. 3 days later, Francis comes in and says, I can't believe it, I've got the perfect woman for you. Her name is Terry Killam. And my jaw kind of dropped, and I looked at her, God's truth, and said, I'll marry her. And a week later, had my first date with Terry. And so began a 5-year journey that was simply the most important journey of my life. Changed me more, reached into me more, made spirituality and the heart come alive for me in ways that were just astonishing.
The book Grace and Grit tells the story of Treya and Ken's 5-year journey. True to its name, the living presence of grace is palpable on every page. Through Treya and Ken's joined voices, the book leaves an indelible mark of love on its readers.
Please welcome Cynthia Bourgeau.
Hi, Ken. It's really an honor to be able to offer you a tribute this afternoon, this evening, whatever time we are in real time. From my heart, I want to speak much more personally. I recognize you, and my heart honors you as one who has also been a fellow traveler on the path of knowing the great love. We both shared configurations in our life which were similar in some ways. A person entered our life, became a person of great love. The throttle, the death was already at the throttle, and for 5 years, the ship drove us wildly to understanding that was burned right into our heart, of the path of intimacy as a path of transformation, and as yearning, as a bridge between the realms. How much can you bear? How much can your heart hold? Carve it deeper, carve it deeper. And what flows out of that empty and sometimes anguishing chalice is a endless stream of creativity. I feel like you kind of know what it's like, just as I kind of know what it's like. And I would say that although my bookshelf is filled with books by Ken Wilber, the one on my bedstand is Grace and Grit. I read it almost every night. I almost do Lectio Divina on it, as a monk would do with a Bible. And I find it strangely joyous and comforting. So thank you, my friend. Thank you for the courage to walk with the heart wide open, to bear the wound of love. Because from that wound, great blessing pours.
Treya revealed your heart, Ken, and in celebration of her, you continue to reveal it. In fact, this room is filled with that big heart, still being ushered into this world.
Please welcome Diane Mucho Hamilton.
Listening and having also experienced Grace and Grit as testimony to the path of love that you've walked, and also being a person who feels like through my karmic, like John Mackey, karmic connection to you, that I've had my heart opened, beyond what I know is possible. And you have really the wrong reputation, Your reputation's always about the mind and the brain and all that, but your work really is, I've seen how much people are touched by it in so many different ways, and how much you've made a distinction that relieved them of a burden they were carrying, or how you gave them a certain kind of company in a question that they felt they were holding all by themselves. And there's been so much of that people have revealed to me, of both their suffering and their kind of walking through that suffering because of how you've led them in that way. And then this the other thing is that because your work is in form and because you've done this kind of meticulous stitching together of ideas and giving us almost a net, like Indra's net, to sort of hold our experience, and through concept made it more clear to us. You know, we get a little attached to the form, but I will say that the first time I met you, what I felt was that I felt the part of you that is so beyond form, so immediate and impactful, and in terms of my heart and my mind actually coming into one place. Like you're in the company of the real deal. When the mind quiets down, the heart opens, and there's no place you want to go. You know you've arrived. It's that moment where you're just there because it's all right here. And I've always had that experience in your presence. I really have. It's really touching. But just to add to that, one day when I was at a seminar that we did together, my dog, who's a really good friend and very close companion of mine, he was lost. And I was like, my heart was just killing me. And then that particular day, Ken came down from where he was teaching and just walked up to me and kissed me and told me that he hoped that I was okay. It was just the sweetest thing. I'll never forget that moment. So thank you so much for that. And finally, I would say that the one other thing is that you've magnetized this group of people and you've planted this question in them that is maybe the greatest evidence for the quality of your love, which is really beyond definition, and that is that we want to serve. We want to serve you, we want to serve each other. We don't know how, we make mistakes, we fumble, we fight, we do all sorts of insane things. But the thing that's the most clear, the most persistent is our longing to do something meaningful for you and for those related to your work. So thank you for opening our hearts. We love you so much. Okay.
Now, after this period, Ken starts writing again. But this time, there's something very different about the writer and the writing.
And then came SES, Sex, Psychology, Spirituality. And writing this book, I started behaving the way my reputation maintained that I behaved anyway, which was a monk on a hill who never went out, never talked to anybody, never saw anybody, never did anything, which is just the opposite of how my life actually was. This, not only did I have a lot of local friends, I was by then friends with virtually everybody in the movement. And they would often, frequently, come by. Until I started working on SES. And it was such an obsessively difficult undertaking that I really did just hunker down and saw nobody. And I mean nobody. I saw 4 people in 3 years. It took me 3 years to do this, which is also something that was very rare, because usually the book is completely written and it takes me anywhere from a month to 2 or 3 months at most to write it. Not this. And because I kept running into some of these very, very difficult issues, which I'll briefly go over in just a minute. So I saw Roger Walsh twice. He came by once a year to make sure I was alive. He's a physician. So he would come by with his stethoscope and go, all right, I guess you're alive for this year.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Terry Patton.
Well, Ken, I had heard of you a long time before that, of course. This garrulous character who was fictionalized by David Data as Mykonos, William Tychonus came wandering out of his office in the late 70s saying, there's this kid in Nebraska who's really smart, you got to look at what he's writing here. I think, and I'm not even sure if your books had been published yet. It was a long time ago. So I knew about you. Then I read No Boundary and Spectrum. Your brilliance was clear. I was amazed. I had that wonderful opportunity to meet you and Treya back in the 80s. We even got together and I got you that brainwave machine that has become a YouTube sensation from my company. So we had a relationship. But when I saw Sex Ecology and Spirituality and Larry Dossey's strong endorsement, I began to read it. And I read more, and I read more. When I saw the quadrants and the levels and the rigor and the detail, you went from being a really smart guy who was integrating psychology and spirituality to being a writer of the code through which cognition could be transformed. The psychoactive power of your work became visible to me for the first time. And it is that I don't always feel people can appreciate, that you are not only a theorist, you are a rhetorician. You create ways of chunking complexity so that it's comprehensible given the limits of human working memory, such that mere mortals can comprehend that which is beyond the complexity of their computational mechanism. And the service that is, the radical, revolutionary motherfucker that you are, just raw doing what needs to be done with such passion and skill, that became visible to me. And, I just, the admiration and respect, so high. My son always needles me. His first awareness of you was seeing a copy of one of the books that has your picture on it in the back seat. And Michael noticing he'd seen some other books with that picture on it too, and saying, well, who is that bald guy? I said, that's the smartest guy in the world. And that's his little tagline for you. That's only a piece of it, though. The wonder, thank you so much. Once I saw that you were creating a cultural movement, really. I didn't know what was all in there, but I was listening to every one of those Integral Naked interviews, and I saw the invitation to that first seminar. I had to be there. I'd been working on a piece of writing that I brought there and showed to you. You responded by inviting me to help create what we created. That invitation has really shaped the whole direction of my work and life ever since, and the constancy and clarity with which you have continued to lead and support and be both critical and kind of the tough love and the generosity and spaciousness, the tai chi of all the moves that you've made to make that possible to be all that it is has been just an endless gift. But one of the things that I found myself getting an opportunity to see that I'm not sure everyone notices is the non-ordinary capacity that you would periodically demonstrate. On a number of occasions, there would be a particular individual at a seminar who was creating a certain kind of warp in the field that was problematic, or a kind of an issue that was in the air. And none of us would have debriefed you about any of this. but you would be calling in remotely or coming in person. And for an unaccountable, uncanny synchronicity, you would speak to that individual in the exact critical way that would disarm the disharmonious energy. The way in which your just relaxed way of being would sync up, the way that spirit could move through you effectively outside probably even your knowing, but to the benefit of us all, has always allowed me to rest back in trust. Trust of you, trust of how it is with us, and your trust of me and trust of us and trust of spirit. And it's part of what makes you so trustable. What has come together in this integral movement is, we're the folks who heard the dog whistle and came to dinner when Ken rang the dinner bell. It's this feast that you can convene that has created this space that we all share. Thank you so much. I love you, and I'm just so grateful for what resonates with us and into the future.
In the midst of this supernova of creative output, unbeknownst to him, Ken is making little known but now famous fans.
Please welcome a longtime friend of Ken's, Tony Robbins.
Hey Ken, it's Tony. Listen, Sage is not with me right now, but we both wanted to add our voice to the chorus of people that are acknowledging you during this tribute. Ken, there's no one like you, as you well know, on the earth, humble as you are. You know who you are, and I think everybody knows that you're a genius. I mean, your genius comes from a hunger and a hunger for the truth, but also a desire to serve humanity that is virtually unmatched. But you connect those things to a level of an intelligence and ability to evaluate and synthesize. I think that's where your gifts have come from. Your gifts in my life happened later in my career, quite frankly, and I picked up Ken's book on the theory of everything. It was one of the first books I actually picked up of his work. And I already knew about spiral dynamics from integration, some work I did with Nelson Mandela. But I'd never heard it described in the way you did it, Ken. It was so simple, I'll never forget. That book was a little tiny book. I read the whole book in one setting, and I was up all night long just writing like crazy. All these distinctions about, oh my God, integration, and yellow and turquoise, and what this really means. And to this day, it affects me in every aspect of my life and my work, because I began to see these memes. I had lots of other distinctions, and I know that wasn't even necessarily your work, but you brought the integration of that work and taught it and shared it in a way that was just so clear and simple and actionable in my world. So, and then obviously I started consuming all the rest of your work, and I had, as you know, Ken, one night I was in Fiji, and I was up all night integrating everything I knew about the body, the emotions, relations, finances, and I did this like 4-hour download, and you and I didn't even know each other. And I was gonna send it to you, and of course, in those days, they went for a digital download, and the thing got corrupted, so you never got it, thank God. You probably thought I was crazy. But it led to our friendship. And Ken, you're a man I rarely get to see because our lives are in so different directions. But you're a brother to me on the path, and my wife Sage as well, sister for her, brother for her. And whenever we get together, it's like we've never been apart. You're one of the sweetest souls I know, one of the most caring and loving souls, and the brightest, smartest, most amazing man that I've ever had the chance to meet when it comes to understanding human beings and our spirit and soul and neurology and physiology all integrated. Ken, we're all privileged to be on the planet with you at the same time. We're all privileged to have been touched by not only your work, but your heart and your soul and your insights. And all I can say is the world's a better place. I'm a better person. And we all are able to touch people even more deeply because of your commitment and because of your caring. And I'll look forward to seeing you soon, my brother. Till then, I hope you take in this tribute and all the love that's pouring into you for all the good you do in this world. Blessings to you, brother. I'll see you soon.
One of the things people may not realize about you, Ken, is how devoted you are to supporting other writers, from helping them find a voice, an audience, to getting published and praised. You passionately share resources with the community of writers.
Please welcome Larry Dossey.
Ken, I want to tell you that one of my sternest critics told me recently that he really had trouble with this idea of universal non-local consciousness, and he said, it's as if your mind is messed up. And I told him, well, don't blame me, blame Ken Wilber. He's the one who is most responsible for messing up my mind. And then I told the critic, but you know, if Ken has messed up my mind, he's messed up the right parts. I have had a lot of people to positively influence me on my journey, Ken, but I want to say nobody measures up to the influence that you have had on me. I don't think I would have broken into publishing without your assistance. And I know you're a very humble guy who, you know, says shucks toward comments like that, but you really changed my life by easing my way into publishing my first book, Space, Time, and Medicine. There's no way under the sun that I can adequately express my gratitude for your friendship and your love over the decades.
And of course, you also inspire some of the very best in film.
Please welcome the director and writer of The Matrix, V for Vendetta, and Cloud Atlas, Lana Wachowski.
Hi, Ken. Hello, integral dinner folk. I wish I could be there. I wish I could be paying tribute to you in person, Ken. Let's see, I was going to talk about how we first met, which I guess we met through our work long before we actually physically met. You and your funny, casually omniscient way had seen Bound. I, in my closeted, super philosophical, nerdy way, had read Spectrum of Consciousness very young. That had started me on my Wilber mania, which I think is a low-grade level of integral development, not very well documented. But we got together when Josh, I think, was interviewing you for the trilogy, and I remember this moment of you coming towards me, and you were so handsome and you were so charming, and we went to dinner, and the conversation flowed so easily from the philosophical to the personal, and you spoke in the way that I thought about things. You made articulate the idea that philosophy was relevant to our lives. I remember talking specifically about that, about Grace and Grit, and how much that had moved me. And then after dinner, we went home, and we had this really, again, the conversation just kept flowing. I think I could have talked to you for days. At some point, we all passed out, went to sleep for a few hours. I woke up at 3:30 when I usually do, and then I heard your feet sneaking across the floor quietly, and then you're typing like an elf at the keyboard, and this tremendous feeling of warmth came over me as I remember thinking that Ken Wilber was at work, that he was imagining ways for us to understand the world, and a profound sense of comfort sort of covered me, and it was a gift that evening. Your friendship was a gift. You're a gift to this world. We're blessed to have you, and yes, thank you very much for being Ken Wilber and doing what you do. The tapping at those keyboards, and I love you.
After sex, ecology, spirituality, you decide to come out of seclusion. You start inviting people over to the house, and this is actually when I first met you, Ken. I remember very well and very vividly the first time I encountered you. It's burned into my brain because at the time, like many, I came from a Midwestern Protestant fundamentalist family, and we are strangely attracted to your work. I read Sex, Ecology, Spirituality, and it absolutely detonated inside my being. It disassembled and reassembled who I was, and when I came back to consciousness, the mystery was receding infinitely in every direction. So I did not know how to contact you, but I took a very wild shot, and I called 411 in Colorado. They gave me your number. Sure enough, hello, this is Ken. Leave a message. I left a message. Hi, I dedicated a record to you. You said, come over for tea. So little did I know, as this ascetic fundamentalist Zen practitioner that I had become, I had managed to export all of the fundamentalism of my Protestantism into my Buddhism. I was not drinking. I was not using any tobacco. I was not eating meat. No sex. I think I gave up swearing for a year. And I was on my way to the mountain to meet the Buddha, the ultimate figure of my projection. And I literally got to drive up a mountain to meet you. Scaling these cliff walls, I climbed out of my Dodge Mahal van and was greeted in the kitchen by a nearly naked Ken Wilber who had alcohol, tobacco, and beautiful women in the kitchen and said, let's party. It was a very paradoxical moment for me. And the first time I experienced a genuine interest in Tantra. So much fun happened in that house that night, nights after that, months after that, years after that. Your house became my home away from home. Do not invite musicians into your house, I think is the lesson you maybe learned from that, because I never left. And what happened in that house completely changed my life. The most laughter, the most fun, the most joy, the deepest relationships of my life, starting with you, came from that invitation. Thank you so much. In fact, I met my future wife in that house. I say future because she was married to you at the time that I met her in that house. But we worked that out. After a very tantric spooning session in a fire blanket, you actually became the best man at my wedding. And you are the godfather to our children. I love you very much. Thank you. I want to share one more story about how fun it is to be your buddy sometimes. This is my favorite time that I've ever been recognized while on tour. I was in a grocery store, and a very elated woman approached me with a laser-like focus in her eyes. And she said, "Oh my God, you're Stuart Davis." And I said, "Yes, I am." And she said, "I'm a huge fan of Ken Wilber." I said, "Yes, I am too." Do you know where the pasta is? The gifts you continue to share, the humor, the curiosity, and the passion, they operate every day in my artistic life. And I'm one of the many lucky artists changed by your evolutionary vision. So let's flash back. As Integral Institute began to take shape, you invited 500 of your other closest friends to that Red Hill house. And thank God someone was there taking notes.
Please welcome Sean Esbjorn Harkins.
Well, my journey with you, Ken, goes back 15 years. And as you know, I was sitting in a mud hut in Africa, sweat dripping down me from the heat, reading Brief History of Everything. And I consumed it in 2 days. And I had what I refer to as an intellectual Satori. Because for 2 years prior to that, I had read 200 books in philosophy, psychology, religion, environmental studies. And I had this heap of knowledge in my brain. And when I encountered your work, it all of a sudden became a web of gnosis. And it blew me away. It blew my mind away. It blew my heart away. It blew my body away. And in that moment, I made a soul pact. I made a commitment to you and to the Integral Vision that I would spend the rest of my life dedicated to you and your work. And every breath that I've breathed since then, and every breath that I'm going to breathe until I pass away out of this incarnation, is a deep, deep bow to you and what you've brought into this world. So upon reading Brief History, I knew I had to swim upstream to sex, ecology, spirituality. But I was trapped in Africa in the desert, and I knew it would take months to get SES to me. So I drove to the capital city of Chad, and I flew to Portland, Oregon, to Powell's bookstore, because I knew that Powell's would have your work, being one of the biggest bookstores around. And I had made a list of 20 books that I had to read as a preparatory course before I read SES. So I went to Powell's, I got those 20 books plus SES, and I headed back to Africa. And I spent the next 3 months reading those 20 books, because I had a deep sense that for me to get as much as I could out of sex, ecology, spirituality, I had to do a deep, deep dive in all of those other authors, because I really wanted that moment to be as delicious and as profound as it could be. And I knew I needed to do some homework to be able to really be there with you in that. So I did, and then as I finished reading all of that, I essentially entered into what was my first 10-day meditation retreat, where I read SES all day for 10 hours for 10 days straight, making 60 hand-page notes of everything that was going on in my whole body-mind stream. And that just confirmed for me the soul pact that I had made upon reading Brief History of Everything. So I headed to Asia to meditate for 9 months, and then I came back home to the States and decided to get a PhD in integral theory. But there weren't really any PhDs out there to be had in your work. So I looked around and decided to go to CIIS, but that presented a problem, because in footnote number 1 of Eye of Spirit, you caution people from even considering CIIS for true integral studies. And so I thought, what am I going to do? This is where I need to go, but, Ken says, be really cautious about going there. So I wrote you a 15-page letter explaining my situation. And I sent it to an address I found in an old journal article and just hoped that it was your address, and it was. And then this was my first experience of your omnipresence and omniscience, is that somehow you emailed me. I had no idea how you got my email. I'm still wondering about that. This was before email was really even email. It was really just used, within a campus in a college. And like Jeff, I remember seeing in my inbox kwilber101@aol.com, seared into my brain. Holy shit! I call my mom up immediately. Mom, you're not going to believe this. Even before I opened it, I was afraid to touch it, it might disappear. I had to tell someone, so I could really know that it was happening. And that began our connection and our relationship. And what you said in that email, and I quote, "Go to CIS, you'll be fine." So 15 pages of my situation, 1 line from you. For a guy who writes 800-page books, I was expecting a little more, Ken. In fact, I was elated and I was pissed off. And so I went to CIS, and in the first semester there, you emailed me out of the blue, no prompting from me, and it just said, "How's it going?" And that's when I really felt your heart, because I really felt like you were tracking me on some level, that you were interested in me, and I was really touched. It's I really got a deep sense of your love for me and just people who are really engaged in the work that you yourself have been articulating for so long. And so at the end of that semester, I sent you all of my papers, because I had written them all on you, and you checked them out, and you liked what you saw. And you wrote me an email and said, "Why don't you come out to my house for a weekend, all expenses paid, and we'll hang out." And that just blew me away. I called my mom immediately. "Mom, you're not going to believe this. I'm going to Ken's." And I arrived at your house on the hill, and with Adam Breedlove, and before I even introduced myself, I just gave you a big hug. and I've just been in love with you ever since. And we have such a deep, mysterious, complex relationship. And I'm so grateful for you in my life. And the fact that I got to then spend the next few years, with a front row seat to the birth of the Integral movement, to be able to go to every single meeting at Integral Institute when 30 to 50 people from around the world would gather around some topic, like integral art or integral medicine, integral education, and to be a fly on the wall and typing away, it was just extraordinary. And there were so many magical moments, such as when David Data yelled at all of us that we were a bunch of pansies and we needed more passion and conflict in our meetings, or to watch, Bert Parley masterfully, facilitate the meetings, or to watch you struggle to facilitate the meetings because you had never done anything like that in your life. And we all started to wonder if you were actually more green than you realized. Or the time you got me in trouble with the JFK authorities because you made an offhand comment to a student about a blowjob. So to be there in your house in a really intimate setting, where you had lived with Treya, where you had written Sex, Ecology, Spirituality, to be there as Robert Keegan and Alex Gray and so many others came together for those meetings, and to be able to take those notes and to really capture and to really ingest your vision. And then to be with you in the evenings, because one of the great things about those trips were staying up very late with you, with a group of us, just talking about everything. And there were times when I would go home to the hotel later and I would just be vibrating and I couldn't sleep. So you've just touched me so deeply, Ken. And the gifts that you're giving to the world have just begun. And I'm absolutely fully committed to serving you and everyone in bringing those gifts more fully into the world. You're the most important person in my life. Like others in this room, I met my wife at your house. Though it wasn't Marcia, it was someone else. And I love you so much, Ken. Thank you for everything.
Please welcome to the stage, Marcia Davis.
Hello. I love you. I have a piece of paper because I am not as cerebrally organized. I tend to overwhelm, so notes. My name is Marcia, and when I was 25 years old, I was getting every single master's you can get at Naropa, and it was quite hysterical because I would walk around with brief history, and I'd say, I'm going to marry him. I'm marrying him. He's my husband. And everybody would laugh because, to be quite honest, I did not know he actually lived in Boulder like Jeff, like many. It was early on, it was not an obvious thing. And so it was quite interesting when one of my girlfriends, who was in the transpersonal psychology program, called me and said, we're going up to Wilber's house. You have to come. And I'm like, what? Yeah. And so I went with her, although I was not in transpersonal psychology yet. And I went up to 6183 Red Hill Road, soon to be my home. And he was so cute. And there was this orchid. And I remember just listening and watching the orchid the entire time, just feeling so right. And I went home, and I lived with disabled. I lived with 10 adults who had developmental disabilities, and I lived with them, and I went home, and I got this fairy paper. It had fairies on it, so Ken, that's so not cool with him. And I wrote this letter of why I loved life so much, and I sent it to him. And I sent it, and that was that. And 2 weeks later, hi, this is Ken Wilber. And he left a message, and it was the same thing where I'm like, no way. So I called him back, and after sharing with all my disabled guys, Richard, oh my gosh, Marcia, what does that mean? And we had our back and forth, and they were so excited for me, and I was so excited. And we went to Matam Fez, and I wore mascara, which is a very big deal for me. And we were together for 6 years. And I call myself, I would say our marriage was healing. It was, I do believe I was one of the first people to kind of reorient him back to life, which I think probably, it was great. It was 6 years of, well, when I first went to his house, in his refrigerator was Pellegrino. He had a lot of vitamins and gummy bears. And this is what he ate. And we really, I think we just fell into being human together. And I love food, and I love to dance, and I love to love, and I love to hug. And I think that we were each other's biggest gifts. And for the longest time, I just loved to love. And it was Ken who said to me first, "I love you." And I was like, and it turned into him he took care of me. And it'll make me cry. And it was, we did silly things, like we went shopping and in Lodo, and we bought way too many clothes. And we drank vodka, and he put peroxide in my hair and made it orange. And then we went to Paul Garcia's and made it platinum. And we bought a dog, but he really put up with me, like you put up with me. Like, I love these really brilliant men, and then I just bring them down to life. Because I got these, I didn't just get dogs, I got bloodhounds and otter hounds that like slobbered, and there was slobber everywhere. But it was so good, and it was so healing. And we used to flip through Gourmet magazine and pick out what we were going to make every night. And you ate. And we lit fires, and we walked the dog, and we would go to Ideal Market a lot. I mean, it was just very simple and sweet. And, I'm very glad I had the quiet part of your life. Because it was very much, you were Kenneth, you were my Kenneth. And we were up on the Red Hill house, and it was the mountains, and it was the sky, and it was silence, and it was wonderful. And I thank you. Like, I love you, and I love our family, and I love that you're the godfather of our kids, and I love that you were the best man in our wedding. And I'm just thankful for you. It's interesting, as a teacher, people can pull their teachers down pretty easily. It makes them feel good. And I think a lot of teachers behave pretty horribly. Having been married to you and living and knowing you so deeply, you're a good man. And you're a good man who is caring, and you're a good man who is sweet, and you're a good man, and I say you're a good man, you're an absolute, you're a little boy. And you've been kissed by God so big and huge, but you really are such a sweet soul. And that's where I think that we have loved each other, and we have loved each other, and I thank you. I love you. We love you.
Please welcome Bobby Richards.
K. Diddy. They asked me to evoke the ambiance of Wynkoop. So Integral Institute starts in Boulder. Ken's house on Red Hill is kind of the abode of the sky gods, but he decides to move to Denver because he's sick to death of Boulder. And he rents this incredible grotto, kind of a matrix, this very dark place with, do you remember, red brick walls and black furniture? And in this space, it was a bit like the Village Vanguard in the early 60s. I mean, people would come up in this dark space, and there would be the most extraordinary conversations about what time it is on the planet, what the future is. It was like Miles Davis and John Coltrane at this extraordinary cosmic level. So every molecule in this space just vibrated. And we had this competition going for who had the newest diesel jeans or who had the latest Prada shoes. And the whole aesthetic at that particular point really turned at Integral. Everything kind of internally acquired kind of this tantric, erotic, blacks, reds, Prada, diesel. And it was, there was one day in, I think it was April 2002, and it was raining, and we were alone as usual. And everyone here talks about your great heart and your infinite compassion. Well, Ken had another side to him that particular day that I would characterize as Godzilla with the brain of a supercomputer. And you were fuming and you were ranting. The Institute was running out of money. And I said, well, how much money do we have? We started off with $1 million. And you said, I think 50,000. I said, 50,000? Where the fuck did the other 950,000 go? And you said, well, we were flying people like Sean into town and paying for it. And you said, I want to shut the thing down. There's no fucking way. I'm going to fundraise. I'm tired of it. Let's just close it down. I'll just get back to writing. And I said, you know, I've been thinking, all these conversations that we've been having with all these incredible people, I've been recording on this little Office Depot digital recorder. I think what we could do is upload this to a website, and I think we ought to call it Integral Raw. And every week we can upload this, or several times a week, and I think thousands of people would want to eavesdrop on what the most incredible conversations are going on the planet. And you kind of said, well, let me think about it. So I think it was a couple of weeks later, I knew we were spending more money. So I checked in and I said, well, what about this Integral Raw concept? And you said, oh yeah, I want to call it Integral Naked. And I said, okay, well, we can start next week. And you said, well, no, I think it's going to take a bit of time. And I said, well, you know, we really don't have much to think about. Are we going to upload all the conversations we're having with people? And you said, no fucking way, because we're just gossiping about everybody else, you know, through half the time, so we have to edit that out. So we decided we had very few parameters. It was like, is it a half-hour show? Is it an hour show? How many times a month? And what do we charge? And so you iterated to like $10 a month, 4 times a month, half hour. So months go by, and there's still nothing going on. You know, we're not uploading anything, and so I check in on him like months later, and I find out that he's now hyper obsessed about every little pixel of this extraordinary website that was capturing in toto the entire aesthetics of that space. The blacks, the reds, the edgy diesel look, the Prada, and that incredible kind of tantric, erotic quality that you were able to capture as an artist. And I don't think people really appreciate this dimension of Ken, that Integral Naked was a work of art. In the early days, I felt it was just a magnificent statement of what the space needed to become. And so, my dear friend, you know, in the last 3 or 4 months, you and I once again are spending a lot of time alone and talking. And from the bottom of my heart, I hope that in the next couple of years, we'll launch something that makes Integral Naked look very, very, very tiny.
Just to show you that we were just figuring out technology, we knew really no real idea how to do this, was a speakerphone, a small handheld Olympia tape recorder, and me talking to Mike Murphy over the speakerphone and holding the little Olympia tape recorder. So we're like, Mike, hi, is that you? Yes, Ken, I'm out here at Esalen. How are you? I'm fine. It's good to talk to you. Good to talk to you, Ken. Let's talk about integral transformative practice. Okay, let's talk about it. And it's just this whole, and we posted that. It's still on the site. And you can still hear it. I mean, it's still fairly well, legible.
Yes, Integral Naked. From the moment you launched Integral Naked, it was like a lightning bolt that struck a spiritual piñata. Yummy things exploded everywhere. I almost went into a diabetic coma feasting on those sacred snacks. And from the start, this guy was there with you, magnifying the magic.
Please welcome to the room, Corey DeVos.
Hi, Ken. It's really hard to believe that in just a few months, in April, it'll be the 10-year anniversary of Integral Naked, which still exists today in the form of Integral Life. And as I think everyone in this room knows, launching Integral Naked was really momentous in the unfolding of Integral. Not only because the public finally got to watch Stuart Davis stick a glow stick up his ass, that's all it takes, man. But, whether it was fair or not, at that point you had earned a reputation of having spoken to pretty much nobody. And all of a sudden you decided to start talking to everybody. And you really haven't shut up ever since. Thank you. We got an entire business model out of it. I think one of the most amazing things about Integral Naked was through your writings, we already had access to Ken Wilber in third person through your beautiful and elegant theories. We had the occasional first-person glimpses into your life, notably through books like One Taste and Grace and Grit. But for a lot of us, this was the first time that we really got to experience Ken Wilber in second person and really got a taste of the extraordinary warmth and wit that is Ken Wilber. It's been the honor of my life curating that website, knowing that you've trusted me with your baby, in a sense, is absolutely extraordinary. And, just to make a general announcement, very exciting, next year in 2014, Ken and I are actually working on an Integral Naked book, which is going to compile some of the most amazing transcripts over the last 10 years. In fact, I've got the contract right here on my table, which is pretty cool. And, I guess I had a note here because I'm kind of spacing out because I'm a little overwhelmed. The beautiful thing about Integral Naked also was it wasn't just a platform for your expression in the world. It was also a space where all these new voices could emerge, many of whom we saw on the stage over the past week. And none of this would be possible, I think, without that. And, when I look around the room, beautiful Angie and I are having our first child in about 4 weeks. And thank you. And you know, the old cliche, it takes a village. Well, because of you, Ken, I have the most extraordinary village to have ever existed in this planet, which is great because we're going to need some babysitters. So we'll be in touch. But again, it's the honor of my life. It's been a total magic carpet ride, and I want to thank you for your wisdom and your care and your friendship. And I just love you so much, Ken. Thank you for everything.
Soon after Integral Institute was established, you took the show on the road, hosting events and seminars all over America.
Please welcome to the stage Clint Fuchs and Dustin DePerna.
So, Ken, these guys all know that you like to fancy yourself a pandit rather than a guru, and which means you don't take formal students. So a couple of us, it took a few years, but came up with a workaround for that, which is simply that we would accept you as our teacher and treat you like that, and you more or less accepted that, or at least you didn't overtly object. So our 10-year relationship has really been characterized by a lot of things, many different capacities and different projects, from Integral Institute to Integral University, launching in the fall, to, that's an inside joke, to Integral Life and Core Integral, and now back to Integral Institute, which has been an incredible journey. But as I reflect on it, there's really only a few things that stand out most powerfully, and it's the personal connections. The time that you wanted me to put that ATV winch on your wall and rig the thing with the ropes so that you could get out of bed, and by the time I had it done, you were walking again. And we spent like $3,000 on it. Or the time that we were watching, I don't even remember the movie, but it was with Diane Keaton, and you really wanted to make sure that I understood how that was a quintessential orange orgasm. And it was accurate. Huh? Or how I think sequentially you walked, like, each one of us through Hedwig and the Angry Inch, and just gave us the teaching about Plato and his view on love. And that just characterized so much of just what exists and what feels so true between us. Your love and your openness and your compassion, just, they're from the future for me. Just like your work, standing out there, reflecting back the light and love that I hope one day to embody. I asked you once, what can I do to support you and support your work past your lifetime? And you said, ensure that this goes down in history as not being about me, some guy who wrote a couple decent books, but about the power of the vision and the clarity of the integral approach. And at first I took that personally and quit my job and started Core Integral, and then only realized that that's actually your message to all of us, and that as Spirit is expressing itself through you, it's just radically not concerned about you, and it's just fully committed to our growth. I thank you for that. Love you.
So Ken, I've told you this before, but the first time I ever saw your picture, I recognized you and had my first small Satori. And it's sometimes said that Dzogchen students over lifetimes recognize teachers. And I still hold that with some relative value, but what I've come to realize too is that first seeing you, you were the first person I'd ever seen who'd come to know their own face. And in seeing you, I had my first glimpse of my original face. And there's nothing that anybody could ever say or do to thank someone who, just by their mere presence, evokes freedom, evokes liberation. And I know that I'm not alone when I say that you've invoked that for so many of us here, just by your being. It's not even your writing, it's what is behind the writing coming through it. It's the crystal clear transmission that you offer. I will offer one story. So a few years ago, I went to Bill Clinton was holding a university, kind of a global initiative, and I went there with a friend, and our goal was to try to get Bill Clinton to support a big publishing house. We could publish some of these young authors who were working with Ken's work, and of course, as you can imagine, there were maybe 1,000 people there, and anytime Bill Clinton would be somewhere, the hordes would kind of surround him, and we had no idea how we were going to get his attention, because we had thought if we could just get Bill Clinton's attention and let him know what we were doing, that maybe we'd have a shot. So Bill Clinton was kind of doing his beautifully charismatic schmoozing as he was walking around this room, and then my friend, just out of nowhere, yelled at the top of his lungs, "Ken Wilber!" And Bill Clinton stopped in his tracks. Turned to us, and walked over to us. The power of a name to stop Bill Clinton in his tracks and to actually give attention, I think gives a little glimmer of the influence that Ken has had on so many world leaders and so many of us. I love you so much, and you know that I'm dedicating my life to bringing forth the goodness in your writing, and we'll always do that, so thank you.
Please welcome to the stage Nicole Fegley and Kelly Sosan Berra.
The Integral Chicks are here to love you up.
Ken, we love you so much. We've been struck over the years by your immense generosity, and we wanted to thank you for opening your heart and your home for us and always having time for us.
Ken, we were thinking back on all the memories and literally just thousands of miracles that we've witnessed over the years in all the work that we've done in the seminars and events through II and IL. And we thought that if we could just bring you just a few of those moments and bring you into that you would more fully feel the extent of the impact that you've had on so many people's lives.
So from every caring gesture we've witnessed, to every tear shed, and every personal illumination made possible.
For everyone who spoke their truth for the very first time, who felt accepted in a whole new way, like they'd found their tribe, and like they'd come home.
So maybe if we could just put you between one of the countless back dances,
the space between two eye-gazing expressions of God.
If you could have been a fly on the wall when someone literally jumped out of the lifeboat.
Or heard us swearing under our breath in that yoga squat.
Thank you, Sophia. If you had the felt understanding shared in the countless mediations.
And the thoughts arising as empty in maybe a couple meditations.
If you had seen every perspective shift.
Or been smack dab in the middle of all those brawls. And trust us,
there were many.
There were a lot.
If you could have been in the nervous excitement and the dreamlike quality of meeting you for the very first time.
Or in the love bliss we felt in every room.
Or in the elation of a whole new feeling of freedom and fullness.
Ken, if you just could have been there when those moments when quadrants, levels, lines, states, and types sunk in just a little deeper. Damn.
And then we realized that actually you were there. And not just because you were one with everything.
Which you are. But because you were the reason that any of that transpired, that any of it took place. You were the attractor, the seed, the glue in all of those experiences. You were the exemplar and the great sage who carved that path out for all of those people to follow.
So thank you on behalf of all those people, Ken.
And I want to hear all the ladies in the house. If you love Ken Wilber, make some noise.
Whoa! The ladies, the ladies.
Please welcome to the stage Colin Bigelow and Brian Berger.
There is a current in the cosmos of spirit's own desire to know itself. To know itself consciously, spirit must wake up. To know itself fully, spirit must grow up. I'm here to say that spirit is real, and only spirit exists. Unqualifiable, eternal, infinite. Manifestation is a perfect ornament of spirit's divine self-expression. So wake up to this supreme truth. I'm here to say that supermind is real, and it doesn't only exist in the mind of Ken Wilber. Third tier, overmind and supermind, are real territories in this very cosmos. You do not have to be a genius to access third tier, but you do have to want to make the journey. Luckily, you're not alone in this grand endeavor. Spirit wants to wake up, and spirit wants to grow up. These are fundamental forces in the cosmos, and you don't have to generate them. I am here to say that there are jet streams in the mind of God, and that anyone at teal or turquoise, all of you, can ride these currents deep into third tier. This is not something you can make happen. You, as a separate self, cannot gain the required altitude. You can't jump that high. So let yourself be lifted on the current of love and liberation that is fully present right now. And I can tell you right now that that current is present in this room, and it is strong. Let Eros lift you to the very face of the divine, and let agape embrace everything in existence. There is a current in the cosmos, a jet stream from atoms to apes to supermind. I'm here to say this current will lift you if you let it. And I'm here to say, thank you, Ken, for pointing out the way. I love you.
Hey, Ken, it's a wonderful honor to be able to pay tribute to you tonight. I love you so much. You know, there's a whole bunch of young folks who've decided that they're going to gamble their whole life and see what happens on the chance that just maybe they'll win and they'll be able to make half as much of a difference as you made. And you don't bet against any of us, and that's really impressive. Thank you so much for that. I love you tremendously, Ken. You're just the most generous human being I've ever had an opportunity to meet. You have so much going on, and you're always spending your time thinking about other people more than you're thinking about yourself. I love you. It's a wonderful honor to pay tribute to you, Ken.
Integral Naked, Integral Institute. Yes, but you are also creating Integral Spiritual Center, hosting some of the most remarkable spiritual teachers in the world.
Please welcome Genpo Roshi.
Ken, you know what I really appreciate about you the most is your big heart. I still remember that very first time that I came to your loft. It's now about 9 years ago. And I just gotten finished with cancer, and we met, and David Data was there, and John Kessler was there, and of course Colin Bigelow was there. And I remember you saying, when you asked me to share a little bit about this big mind process, you said, if you don't mind, I'm going to just witness it. You know, I'm just going to sit back here and watch it, and I'm not going to participate, but you can do it with everybody else. And I said, that's fine. And he said, but do you mind if I tape it? So you put out this little tape recorder, you know, I think it was digital, and you set it down on the table there. And I don't think I was 1 or 2 minutes into the process, and you just dove in head first, and you were just like answering the questions and totally into it. I mean, it was like, I don't know what you were thinking before, but you certainly got into it. And you then helped me get Big Mind out into the world, probably at that point like no one else had ever done. And it's still hugely, because of you, that Big Mind is out there in the world as big as it is. But what really I love about you is how you connect people, and your heart, and how you don't seem to be ever threatened by other people. It's like your heart and mind are so big, big mind, big heart, that you really connect people to people. You've connected me to so many great people. And you've been such a powerful influence on my work, on the Big Mind process, having me back over and over again. And I've met so many great people thanks to you and through you, and the way you have promoted me and my work and the Big Mind work and others. I'm just forever grateful. And the foreword you wrote on the book, Big Mind, Big Heart, I mean, we still use it all the time to promote the book. So I just, from the deepest part of my heart, I love you, and I just really want great things for you, and I hope you stick around and stay with us and continue your teaching. I love you. Thanks.
Emergent methodologies such as Big Mind were an important part of your continuing work on States and Stages.
Please welcome to the room, Alan Combs.
Well, Ken, after tonight, you have a lot to live up to. As I remember right, our personal relationship began when I viciously attacked you on the web. And one of my friends said, that man will never speak to you. And lo and behold, the next day, Ken wrote me a very nice letter, and we worked out our differences, and he later commented that we were like two guys that had a fist fight in the backyard and then went in and had a beer together in the kitchen. So it's been a great beer, Ken. You know, those of us who have accomplished what we wanted to accomplish in our lives and have been able to become the people we wanted to become have almost always had someone to help pull us up. Open opportunities, give us teachings, and make our lives possible in a way that couldn't have been possible otherwise. You have been one of those people for me, Ken, probably the most important one. I consider you a friend, a colleague, and just a wonderful person in my life. Thank you very much. I love you too.
So the Institute has a hell of a run. It's the hot ticket, the one place on earth for people to mingle with you and the integral community. But then a curious thing happens. Integral expands globally into a dispersed network of nodes. Integral life is created to document this movement.
Please welcome to the room, Rob Smith.
Well, I don't know about you, but I'm a wreck. Experiencing your life through the lens of all of these people, some of whom I have not known personally, and some of the stories that I haven't known, is an extraordinary experience. And I've gone through no less than a dozen different versions of this kind of tribute to you. But what I will say is I did not meet my wife at Red Hill. That much I'm sure, but there have been 4 people who have influenced my life in profound ways, in ways that really sort of set the basic architecture of my life. My mother and father, and hi Mom, I understand she is watching on the webcam. My wife Tiffany, and you. And that's, like everyone here, it's a profound privilege to have known you and to work with you. Now, when I came to Integral Institute, it was at the end of what I would call sort of the stage 1 identity phase of the global movement, where everyone was identifying with Institute as the 500-pound gorilla. And one of the remarkable things that I want to tell everyone that may not know this is that as it moved into a stage 2 differentiation globally, the reason that could occur safely, the reason that could occur with the support and love that it did from 2007 to 2000, well, to now, is because of this man. And I want you to really appreciate what that is. A life's work finding its way out into the world in new ways and differentiating away from Ken, differentiating away from Integral Institute, giving rise to Core Integral, giving rise to Integral Life, giving rise to Meta Integral now, and a new emergence of Integral Institute and Integral Institute chapters all over the world, giving rise to Integral Coaching Canada, all of these things. From an evolutionary point of view, to be a leader in that space, but to hold the love and the capacity that you held to allow that differentiation to occur, I just had to say that it's an extraordinary feat of integral leadership. And I want to end by saying this. Everyone in this room who have worked together since at least I've been here for the last 6 years, you know, individually or collectively, we've done great things together, we've fought, we've had our differences. But if we take seriously what we have said here tonight, in this next phase, we need to be in service to him by being in service to each other. I love you, Ken.
Ken, now more than ever, your integral vision influences and inspires the work of leaders and writers from all over the world.
Please welcome to the room, Cindy Wigglesworth.
Ken, I was honored, shocked, thrilled, many simultaneous emotions when I was asked to speak tonight, so thank you very much. I found your work when I was just starting the work on spiritual intelligence and the assessment, and I was complaining to a friend about how frustrating it was trying to integrate all these different ideas. She says, you need to read Ken Wilber. And she said, start with Grace and Grit. So I took it with me on vacation, and I wasn't even 15 pages into it, I think, before I turned to my husband and I said, oh my God, this man is a genius. And I ripped through that book with tears of joy and tears of sadness. And as soon as I got back to Houston, I went out and bought more books. And let's just say I have many of them now. But as I ripped through those books and I was reading your material, it was such a gift from God and from Spirit. And I am so profoundly grateful for your ability to synthesize information so clearly that we can then work from to take the next step into the conscious evolution of our planet. I signed up for the very first of the Fred Kaufman seminars with like in 30 minutes of getting the email I was in, which was good because I think they sold out in like an hour. And I've met such precious friends through the attractive force that you yield. I met Jeff at that seminar. We began ILEA from that seminar, Integral Leadership in Action. A great many beautiful things have come from that. And since that time, as you know, the Unity movement has gotten very interested in being integral and Christian. And you've been so generous with your time with me, with Dr. Gary Simmons, with Unity, and so generous with your time in supporting my work around the book. I am just profoundly grateful. So I'd like to say, of course, that I love you and I appreciate your brain, but I want to comment for the sake of the room that you are so much more than that. You are such a generous-hearted person, but you are also a cosmic-centric, magnetic attractor of awesomeness. And this room is a manifestation of that. So thank you for being born in this time. I feel deeply privileged to have had a chance to meet you in person. Thank you.
Please welcome Barbara Dossi.
Ken Wilber, you have changed my life. You've helped me understand what an integral perspective is about. I read it, then I read it, and then when I look at my work and helping my colleagues and I really transform healthcare, this integral perspective allows us to work from our own authenticity, to create that subtle field of shift and changes and how to sustain it. And of course, you have helped me declare and take the courage to write the theory of integral nursing, which was very scary at first. I went, there's no way I can do this, and I did it. I also will never forget the day I had sent you an article on Florence Nightingale that I had written, and you called the house, and usually when you call here, you're looking for Larry. And so I answered the phone, and you said, hey, Barbie, hi. And I said, oh, Ken, good to hear you. Let me get Larry. And you went, Barbie. And I said, yes. And he said, I want to talk to you. I'll talk to Larry later. And then you said, this work you have done with Florence Nightingale is extraordinary. Can I interview you? You took my breath away. And this validation of the depth of the work that I have done has also allowed me, in my global perspective and my global work, to take this gigantic piece and to take a deep dive, weave all of those pieces together. And when people say, go small, it's too big, we are integral thinkers, my colleagues and I, and there's no way we can take one little piece. It's all together. Thank you for changing my life. I love you.
Please welcome Deepak Chopra.
This is a direct message from me, Deepak Chopra, to my friend Ken Wilber. I just want to say, Ken, you have been amazing as an influence all my life. When I was a young fledgling writer, writing about mind-body medicine, and I started to do my research, I came across your work on consciousness, and I knew right there that you were going to be a guide and a mentor and a friend to me. And I started devouring your work ferociously, and of course learned everything about integral thinking and consciousness from you. It is no wonder that you have been called the Einstein of consciousness. I think you are. And ever since then, anytime I needed a new insight, had a new epiphany, I knew that you had already thought of it. I have worked very hard and diligently in the last 25, 30 years trying to create a model for non-dual consciousness, and at the moment working very hard with neuroscientists and physicists on qualia science. But even now I go back over and over again to all the great insights that I've had through the years, which have really influenced my thinking and the evolution of my own awareness in many ways, and the unfolding of understanding as well. I have also had the privilege of meeting you at your home and getting to know how delightful you are, how wonderful a sense of humor you have, and your essential humanity, which is not a social mask but very authentic. Your presence, your creativity, your language skills, and the way you bond with people is just amazing. And all I can say is I'm very grateful to be your friend, and very grateful that you have been a friend, mentor, and guide to me.
Something else happens. A second wave of integral explorers shows up. Young, vibrant, different. Ken, they seem to skip stages. I mean, I know no one skips stages, but it seems like they're skipping stages. These young upstarts seem to whiz right through them like they've got a zip line through the first few fulcrums. It's probably all that Red Bull you've got them drinking. This next wave of integral hearts and minds is incredibly promising. And looking at them, we know there are some great surprises coming up the developmental escalator.
Please welcome to the room Robert McNaughton and Decker Kunoff.
Ooh, the younger generation has the microphone. Let the embarrassment begin. Well, Ken, let me first thank you by acknowledging that we've got this amazing integral community practice center a few miles up the road, and thanks to Jeff as well, where there are people coming 7 days a week, and in some cases 24 hours a day, to practice and imbibe and drink and marinate in integral consciousness. And the funny thing is they have no idea who you are and don't care about integral theory. That's pretty impressive, so thank you for that, and of course that creates a lot of challenges. We've got our work cut out for us, so we need your help, please. I can say on a personal level, when I first encountered your transmission, and each time I encounter your transmission, the feeling is I feel the spine of my vision being aligned with structures that are positioning me in a way that I can see my war, in a way in which the war of my fathers and of the wars that culture has been trying to enroll me in that haven't been inspiring me, this is the one that has reached into the fiercest depths of my heart and called me forward. And I think that's probably what is drawing the people in my community more and more to this war, and it's the war of loving all perspectives with razor-sharp discernment. So thank you for that.
I'm also overwhelmed because we're intimate with the people you don't get a chance to meet, but who are quickly warming up to reading these books after all. And just even the room full, man, you do not know how much love. I'm blown away. There's this guy, man, I can't remember your name and I can't see, but he had a profound experience when he's young and ends up committed and is lumped into a pre-rational category. He reads your articulation of the pre-trans fallacy and realizes that he's not crazy. Well, he's not crazier than anybody else anyway. Crazy like we all are, and is contributing to people in his life. And this room is full of people taking something real and making more love because of how you've touched us. And we don't have time to even come close to touching that, but we do have a gift for you.
Yeah, so I mean, apparently you've started writing again, which is so inspiring in a way. It's like being a surfer, and you can feel the water starting to pull back, and I'm just so excited about the wave that's coming. But we don't want that to distract you too much from your day job, so we've created a little tool to help speed that up. So here we have Ken's big-ass stamp of approval to just make that process a little faster. So.
We didn't want your arm to get too tired. And the fact that you have your perspective and the just amazing amount of work you've done has validated the work of so many passionate people. And that you've set a standard for what we're talking about with Integral is huge. But as far as this new wave, it's people who maybe like really beautiful theory or philosophy here and there, but what they're committed to are their families, their friends, animals, the creek that I used to be able to swim in, and your teachings have an impact. They're interested because they're noticing more love, less obnoxiousness and more love that ripples out because of these perspectives. That's that selflessness that has been acknowledged over and over again. That's how it's rippling out now. Thank you.
I want to be stamped with that thing later tonight, like strike a midnight. If I could be first, that'd be great. And maybe that's the point, really. This is not the ending, but this night and this community and you, it's a big celebration of what has transpired.
Hey, Stuart, listen, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt and everything, but...
David Reardon, everyone, producer of this event. What's so important that you had to stop Ken's tribute?
Well, I know. I know we were trying to bring this to a close, but you weren't here yesterday, and we had a special visit from an old friend of Ken's. Kermit was here.
Kermit?
Yeah. So in this, it was an amazing conversation between them. I mean, here was, like 20, 30 minutes of it. And the audience kept pushing Kermit to, sort of talk about his own evolution, and he was just sort of saying, I just really need to reflect on that, right? So he, it got all done. He got on a plane. He went back to Hollywood. Well, look, he just sent us some. And apparently he reflected on the plane about how this, and I just thought it might be the perfect way to end this.
Hot off the press.
There you go. So let's roll the Kermit clip, hot from Hollywood.
Greetings all, Kermit the Frog here with a very special namaste to my good friend Ken Wilber. Ken, what can I say, huh? Actually, I literally mean that. What can I say? How can I possibly find the words to express the depth of the admiration I have for the way you gathered together all the world's disciplines and organized a map that virtually anyone can learn to understand? I have to tell you, I've been racking my brain trying to figure out the right words. I mean, I kept thinking, why, oh why, am I stuck with little more than a reptilian brain in a world of paleo-mammalianized brains? Completely wasted on horses. At least that's my opinion. I reached for my iPhone in hopes that someone might have neo-cortexted me, but no, just Miss Piggy giving me a piece of her mind. Something you don't want. I thought to myself, if only I could spontaneously evolve in some unimpeded, purposeful big bang of Darwinian/Grave/Wilberian amalgamation. But how could that be possible? I mean, after all, I am just a simple frog who, let's see here, can't comprehend systems and can only see bugs. Page 600. I mean, what do I know about biology anyway? For me, a paramecium is just 2 Latin mice. That's a Fuzzy Bear joke. Anyway, but then it hit me like a ton of bricks, like an epiphany. And it felt exactly like trying to hop across the interstate and being sideswiped by a Buick. I, Kermit the Frog, was born green. Yes, sirree, relativistic, personalistic green. There's no beige or red or blue or orange for me. I have always been green. So, being green, I figure if I hit the ground running, yellow is only a heartbeat away, right? Right. So, tonight, ladies and gentlemen, in a special tribute to our guest of honor, Mr. Ken Wilber, I, Kermit the Frog, will make the momentous leap to second tier. Steady yourselves. I mean, how hard can this be? Frogs leap all the time. Okay, here we go. On 3. And 1, 2, 3. Oh my goodness, it worked. Oh no, I seem to have regressed. Good grief. I guess it was too magical. Well, listen, this is your night, Ken, and all my love and thanks for the map. Looks a lot like I'm going to be needing it. Maybe this is what they meant by finding the rainbow connection.
I mean, what can you say after that? So I think the only thing to say, would you please rise with me, ladies and gentlemen, and honor our friend and our mentor with your mind and your heart, Mr. Ken Wilber. On behalf of the global community of all Integral Kennel, we want to give you the Integral, the first and maybe the only, we'll see, Integral Lifetime Achievement Award 2012. We love you, Ken.
This works? Yeah. Do the lights turn on back here? Can we get lights in the room? There we go. First of all, I'd like to know whose idea this was. I thought most of you hated me. And so I figured I could get through a fair amount of it without kind of breaking down and blubbering. But I have to admit, I lost it several times. This is as touching a gathering and I guess tribute that I can really recall. And it just touches my heart enormously. I had, I guess, what you might call an integral Satori, as opposed to a Satori. I had my first integral Satori around 19 or 20, and then my first Satori around 23. And I was I'd gone to Duke University in medical school, and I simply didn't really enjoy what I was learning. There wasn't anything really creatively new that was done. And so I felt sort of like I was kind of a glorified plumber, just sort of, you find something broken, you ratchet wrench it a few times, you put it back together, screw it together, radiate it, give them a pill, and off they go. So I switched to biochemical research and ended up with the positively disgusting project of learning how vision works. And in order to do that, I needed retinas. And since you couldn't really get human retinas, you could get cow retinas. And being in Lincoln, Nebraska, the sort of center of the beef, Kansas and Nebraska being the center of the beef capital of the world, I walked into American stores, cattle slaughtering company one day, and just sort of walked up to the head guy at the head of the slaughtering line, and I said, I don't know how to ask you this, but I'm doing research on vision, and I need some retinas. And so, if I could get like 100 cow eyes from you guys a week or something, I mean, I know you need the cow eyes for like hot dogs and shit, but if I know the cow's lips and eye like going to hot dogs, but if you could just, and they were delighted. So once a week, I went and got 100 cow eyes. And they were in a black sack, so they were dark adapted, the same way your eyes get dark adapted as you stay in a dark room. Took them back to the laboratory and set them all out on a big plane of ice. And so I had 100 cow eyes looking at me, which gave me nightmares for years. And always reminded me of an Alex Gray painting. How his eyes got, thousands of eyes looking out at you, that's sort of what I always thought when I looked at it. I thought, well, I got me an Alex Gray painting here. But what I was really doing was going home and studying Eastern and Western philosophy and psychology and sociology and religion, and was going through, was skimming upwards of 4 books a day and just really running through it. And what I was particularly upset with is I was fairly unhappy, and I wanted some way to become happy. And as I studied all of these different schools that purported to tell you how to become happy, they all disagreed with each other. So Gestalt, in a sense, or Freudian, said you had to strengthen your ego, and Zen said you had to get rid of your ego. So what the heck are you supposed to do? And so I spent a year or two going through all of these different disciplines. And finally, one day, it hit me that they weren't all the same disciplines working with the same level of consciousness, but that they were different disciplines, each of which were working with a different level of consciousness. And the consciousness itself came like a rainbow, with many different levels and bands and colors. And each of them represented a different degree of development or unfolding. And something could go wrong at any level. And these different theories, these different techniques, whether it's existential therapy or psychoanalysis or Gestalt or Jungian or transactional analysis or Zen, were each working with one of these different levels. So that hit me really hard. And it was sort of my first taste of how things that seemed to be apparently contradictory or disagreeing could in fact fit together if you could just find a bigger perspective, a bigger picture in which to hold all of them. And so I just sort of immediately decided to drop out of graduate school. At the time I was getting a doctorate in biochemistry, and I had completed enough course material to get a master's degree. So I took a master's degree and then told my professors I was quitting. And I was going to, like I think we mentioned up here, I was going to write a book on consciousness and the soul and stuff. And they just totally flipped out. But I went home and wrote that book. And each year I would write a book, and I would expand this integral framework. And so first I did psychotherapy, and then I did developmental psychology, then I did anthropology, then I did sociology, then I did philosophy, then I did spirituality and religion and so on, and just sort of kept expanding the overall approach to bringing together into one big picture all of these otherwise seemingly contradictory approaches. And that was a very important realization for me, because if we were going to find some way to bring together all of these various otherwise contradictory approaches, then it would have to be something like that. We would have to find some way that they would fit together in a coherent fashion. Otherwise, we were just going to be stuck with fragmented, partial, broken, separated, disharmonious types of disciplines, none of which agreed with each other, all of which disagreed with each other, and essentially really got us nowhere. And it was at that time that developmental studies started to indicate that although it was very small, at that time it was maybe 2 to 3% of the population was actually undergoing an emergence of a new level of consciousness that was variously called integrated or second tier or systemic or integral, and that this level of consciousness itself had an inherent drive to pull together different disciplines. It wanted to do that on its own. In other words, that was one of its own intrinsic motivations. That was one of its own drives. So it didn't have to be something that just an individual wanted to do, and that an individual would come along and say, okay, I'm going to try to take this, and I'm going to put it together with this, and I'm going to put it together with this, and I'm going to put together this. And I, the individual, am the source of pulling these things together. But this new level of consciousness was the motivation that wanted to pull them all together. And so this, of course, was the beginning of the integral stage of consciousness development. And when that started to emerge, and when it started to become clear that this was a very genuine level of consciousness, a very real part of the cosmos, then all of a sudden that started to change everything, because it meant that all of the things like culture wars and all of the battles and conflicts that human beings were having in terms of their different values, their different worldviews, their different motivations, their different drives, these could all be brought together in a higher level of development. And so this meant that the way that we had been going about trying to calm things down and have all of these contradictory approaches fit together, which is basically just sort of trying to force them together or push them together or try to find ways to make them come together. This higher level of consciousness was actually capable of doing it itself, simply because it had a broader and a more complex capacity for thinking. And therefore, it could transcend and include all of the lower levels of development. And so all of a sudden, there was a way to bring these things together. And if that was the case, that would actually change the entire course of human history, because it meant that there was something intrinsic in human beings that was starting to emerge and that would unite the world's previously combative worldviews and combative values and combative approaches, and instead find ways that they could all be coherently brought together into a single large picture. And this would end the conflict that human beings had with their own particular inherent values and worldviews and drives and so on. And so this was great hope, because it meant that for the first time in history, human beings had and were on the edge of an intrinsic breaking into big pictures that would unite human beings' various belief systems and belief structures. And so this was a way that we could actually put an end to culture wars and put an end, hopefully, even to physical wars. And it was something that was inherent in the human condition. Now, this growth and development had been occurring in humans for thousands of years. But each one had been relatively partial. And each one would transcend and include and transcend and include and transcend and include. And so we would get bigger and bigger and bigger pictures. But it was only with this new second-tier integral development that all of the previous partial pictures could be brought together. And that changes everything. And virtually everybody in this room has some sense of that togetherness, some sense of that inclusiveness, some sense of that comprehensiveness, some sense of a genuine, holistic envelopment. And you do this because it speaks to you. It makes sense to you. You can start to look at it and go, that makes sense. I get it. I can see how these things can come together. And so now we have the percentage of individuals that are reaching into these integral levels has now moved from 2 or 3% to 4 or 5%. And there's indications that within a decade, it could move into 10%. And this dramatically will change how human beings can relate to each other and dramatically change the, if you will, the crankiness, the nastiness, the irritatingness that human beings would have for each other's views and start to have them come together and literally become part of a harmonious family. And that can sound a little gooey and soft and sentimental, but the data is there. This integral consciousness is emerging. It's for real. It's happening. And under those circumstances, that really is going to completely reshape humanity on this planet. And so those of you who are gathered here, and those of you who go home and in your own ways work on integral awareness or apply it to your job or your profession or your relationships, this is great. This is good. This is how this starts to spread and engulf human beings across the planet. And for that to happen has never, ever, ever happened in human history. We have never had an inclusive society where there were room for all different views. And so that could start to happen is probably some of the best news that any of us could imagine. And the great thing is, we are all lucky enough to be alive during the period this is happening. And so we can rejoice in that sense, rejoice in finding truly inclusive worldviews and truly inclusive perspectives that will bring people together in ways that has never, ever, ever occurred. And that's exceptional. That's exceptional. So we still have a ways to go, obviously. This is only the fourth, maybe the fifth or sixth major transformation that's ever occurred. But occurring it is. And so coming together like this and celebrating that is great news. And I for one, am just delighted to see all of you here and all of you celebrating this extraordinary event. I mean, it is a truly extraordinary event. And to be alive during that period, it can just give you goosebumps. I mean, it's just so extraordinary that this is underway, that this is happening, that this is real. And we have evidence to prove it. We have data to prove it. We have tests to prove it. So it's not just some theory like deconstruction that, may or may not be real. And God hopes it's not. But this is based on actual empirical testing and experiments. And it all comes out showing the same thing. So I want to thank all of you for being here and for coming together and celebrating this extraordinary event that this planet is now undergoing. It's an amazing, amazing period of time. And I God bless all of you for the nice things that were said. It cost me hundreds of dollars for these people. But I I think on balance they did good, and I was touched. And so thank you so much for coming together. And I hope we'll do some similar thing next year. Or you all might hold some similar gathering and celebration and talking about how you can help take this transformation forward and make it part of the human family. We are facing our most wicked and worst and most difficult problems the planet has ever faced. And all of the problems are global. And the only approach that can really think globally is integral. And so integral has come along just in time for these wicked global problems, whether they're economic or military or terrorist or climate warming or whatnot. These can only be handled through complex, big picture, multiple perspectives, mixed method research, and there just aren't hardly any models that do that except integral. So if it's not only sort of giving you a sense of, God, this makes sense to me. This is something that really turns me on. It is something that I can look at life and go, wow, I get it now. This all hangs together. This all makes sense. I can now understand how everything can be pulled together. Then that's fantastic. And so let's not stop there. Let's push forward into, now how can we actually apply that? How can we actually get that done? How can we go out there and make that happen? And so if we can, all just sort of let that be part of our own New Year's resolution, then that would be great. And in the meantime, I hope to see all of you at one time or another and soon. And God bless you very much. I love you all, and thank you so much for this evening. It's meant an enormous amount to me. Thank you.